Hey, it's Marissa from Attio, and welcome to the first video in our Workflows course. We're starting off with a deep dive into Attio Workflow triggers. Triggers determine when a workflow should run. The first two categories of trigger are record and list triggers, each of which have the same three different triggers. Record and list entry command triggers let users manually kick off a workflow run associated with a specific record or list entry. A record created trigger will fire off a workflow anytime a new record of a specific type is created, and then the corresponding list entry trigger will fire anytime a record is added to a given list. There's also record and list entry updated, which can monitor changes to individual records of a given object type or entries on a given list. We'll give two examples here, one of the record command and one of the record updated. There's one input for a record command, which is the object that we want to make the workflow available on. In this example, we're making a workflow that lets users easily create a new deal associated with a company. I've selected companies as the object type, and then using the create record block, we'll create a deal record. I've used variables to add the company name as the deal name, setting it to the qualification stage, choosing the user who triggered the workflow as the deal owner, and then associating the deal to that company. We'll go into more detail on using action blocks as well as variables in later videos. In practice, this is how that workflow looks. So you first up have the ability to choose one or more companies, and then you can run that workflow for the company, which will create a deal associated to it. The Run Workflow button is also available on an individual record page, so I can run the workflow over here for this company, and then if we go into our deals object, we'll see that a brand new deal has just been created and it's been associated with the company. This is a great way to create easy shortcuts for really common tasks that your team takes. The next example we'll walk through is a record updated trigger. The record updated trigger takes two inputs, the object that we want to monitor and optionally the specific attribute that we want to monitor changes in to trigger the workflow. As this workflow is currently built, it will trigger any time a deal changes stage. More often than not, you'll want the workflow to trigger only when an attribute changes to a specific new value. So in our example, we're going to congratulate the team when a deal is moved to 1. To do that, we'll add in a filter block. I'll talk about filters in more depth in our next video, but here we can see that the record updated block returns variables containing the values in the attributes we're monitoring before and after triggering the change. In this case, I'll filter the workflow only to continue when the new value of the deal stage is 1. So here you can see if I move this deal card into the closed 1 stage, a celebration will appear. Attribute updated triggers behave similarly to record updated triggers, with the exception that they fire not only when the attribute value is changed, but also when the record is created for the first time. Task created triggers trigger anytime a task is created. And we have 3 different utility triggers. The first utility trigger is a manual run, which will be predominantly used for debugging and testing. When you use a manual run trigger, a trigger manual workflow button will appear at the top of the page in the workflow editor so that you can test out all of the steps. So trying this out, when I click on that button, Attio takes me to the workflow's run page to see the history of the run that's kicked off. This particular workflow broadcasts a message which has appeared at the bottom of the screen so I can tell that the workflow has run successfully. The recurring schedule trigger lets you define a scheduled cadence to run a workflow on a recurring basis. You can select the frequency of your schedule as well as the particular time of day that it will run. And finally, among the utility triggers is one of the most flexible triggers in Attio, which is the Webhook receive trigger. This will provide a URL to which an external tool can send a webhook or an HTTP post. This is a really valuable trigger for having external systems kick off processes or workflows within Attio. The last category of triggers are triggers associated with Attio's native integrations. Today we have 3 of these triggers. We have outreach triggers to trigger a workflow anytime a contact is added to a sequence or the state of a sequence is changed, and a type form trigger to trigger a workflow anytime a new form response is received. This is commonly used by customers who have type form forms on their website for inbound inquiries and lead management. And that's a quick overview of all of the triggers available in Attio's workflow tool.